let's move on to module 2, talking about 2026 already. So 2026 is no ordinary year. It is known in the Chinese calendar as 丙午年 or the fire horse year. So but here's a common question most people will ask, especially laymen. When exactly does the fire horse year begin? Well, it really depends on which calendar you refer to, because the Chinese system actually uses two different calendars, different but complementary. Yeah? So they have the solar calendar and the lunar calendar. So solar is based on the sun position, lunar is based on the moon cycle. Okay, let me break it down for you. Before that, Jia Xuan say, how come it seems to get worse year by year? Haha. Now, it's like moon waxing and waning. It must go all the way to the bottom before it can spring up again to become full moon. So the worst we have to get to the bottom first before it can totally flush out. And then good time will come. So be excited lah. Be excited and anticipate that the what do you call that, good time will come. Yilin is asking which is the worst year. Coming 2 years. I will explain more. Why coming 2 years? Why I use 2 years and not only 1 year, but it's 2 years. Okay. So if you whatever you do this year and whatever you do for 2026, you are actually covering for 2027 still too. Because this 2 year, either the worst can happen or the pivoting year could happen to you. Okay, so we want to be in control. We don't want to be reacting. According to the solar calendar, the year of the fire horse begins on 4th February, which is Li Chun. For 2026 is a Wednesday. So this day is also known as Li Chun, I mentioned, or the start of spring, marking the true shift in energy. According to the lunar calendar, the new year begins on 17 February 2026, a Tuesday. This is known as 正月初一, or the first day of the lunar year, what most people celebrate as the Chinese New Year. Now, you might ask, which calendar is more important? Which one should we follow? My answer to you is both. Each calendar holds a different key. For an accurate and holistic forecast of 2026, we must integrate both perspectives, like what I always do for the annual seminars. I combine insights from both calendars to give you my insights. Yeah. So relying on just one would just give us an incomplete picture. So as we explore the fire horse year ahead, its opportunities, its warning, and its deeper meaning, we'll be drawing insights from both solar and lunar calendars and a series of traditional Chinese metaphors and calendar markers that have been passed down through generations, each carrying symbolic meanings about weather, agriculture, economy, and social conditions. Okay, if it's asking any good things happen in 2026, I will say good and bad things will happen. It's always yin yang. Okay, so what I want you to do is, while I may describe all the lousy things to you, please put on the yin yang lens to squeeze out the opportunities from the challenges, and that could be your breakthrough openings. Okay, let's begin our analysis with 丙午year. In traditional Chinese metaphysics, here's a saying: red horse and red goat brings calamity. 赤马红羊节, these 2 years, 26 and 27, it referring to this 丙午年 and 丁未年. But what exactly are the red horse and the red goat? Just a quick, simple explanation. They come from the ancient 60-year cycle 60甲子, where each year is represented by a combination of heavenly stem and earthly branch. So this cycle repeats every 60 years. So the Ping and the Ting, because this year is 丙午年, right? The Ping and Ting is next year, are both fire elements, and the fire is symbolized by the color red, or in Chinese called 赤. Wu represent the horse, which is fire also. Now, Wei represents the goat, which is earth, and Wei love to combine with Wu to form a greater fire. So it's a very big fire these 2 years. So Bing Wu, Ding Wei are called the red horse and red goat years, or 赤马红羊 in Chinese. Now let's get deep into this 赤马红羊. These years are traditionally, I say traditionally, so it's not out of nowhere. I'm not saying traditionally, seen as disruptive and unstable, often marked by major events like wars, natural disasters, or social upheaval that threatens the stability of the entire world. Otherwise, if this thing never happened, then it would be planting of a seed that would eventually bring about the tremendous disruption few years down the road. So it's either, something really bad happen next year, next 2 years, or the seed will be planted this coming 2 years, and then the subsequent few years, this seed will explode. Okay, so when I say this seed could be a person, could be a seemingly insignificant event at that time, that means in these 2 years, or something else. Right? But when it explodes, the scale could be unimaginable, like nationwide violence and upheaval, tens of thousands of deaths and mass purges, breakdown of institution and civil order. Because this concept originates from Chinese metaphysics and the calendar system. So these 2 years, tends to have a particularly strong impact on China itself, often reflecting intense challenges or upheaval in China. However, it is important to understand and to note, to relate back to today's situation, that this does not mean other regions of the world are immune or unaffected. In fact, because of the global interconnectedness, the ripple effects can spread far beyond China's border, influencing international events and crises as well. Let's examine 3 past cycles of Bingwu and Dingwei to understand why these years are said to bring calamities. Okay, so 3 cycles back, I don't want to go beyond because we only got 3 hours today to talk about all this. So let's keep it to 3 cycles. So starting from 1846, 1847 as the first cycle, and then 1906 and 1907 as second cycle, and then 1966, 1967 as the third cycle. So we'll examine these past 3 cycles, Bingwu, Dingwei, and then from there we try to draw out lessons and see how can it apply into next 2 years. Shall we do that? Okay. Starting with the first cycle. First cycle is which year again? 1846 and 1847. So remember these 2 years. Bingwu, Dingwei. Now, the slide here show the Great Famine. Okay, famine, often called the Irish Potato Famine, was once one of the most devastating events in Irish history. Oh, it's outside China. Okay, it's outside China. So in 1845, a fungal disease, commonly known as potato blight, began to spread across Ireland. The blight caused potatoes to rot rapidly, both in the ground and in storage. About 1/3 of the potato crop was lost that year, and the worst was yet to come. In 46, that means a year later, 丁未年, the blight struck again with greater ferocity, destroying nearly the entire harvest. So here we can see 丙午年, the seed was planted. That means the potato blight show up. Not that serious, right? It's only 1/3 of the crops was lost. But then in 丁未年, the blight strike again with greater ferocity, destroying nearly the entire harvest. So the pattern continued in subsequent years. That means, for a few more years down the road, the consequences of this potato blight caused widespread starvation and what do you call that? Destitution. That is in 1845, 1846. Huh? Okay. Now in 1847, or wrong. So 1847 is the 定位年. This year saw the outbreak of what is known as the Panic of 1847. That means market panic. A major financial crisis in the United Kingdom. What happened, you might be asking? After years of speculative investments, especially in railways, the financial bubble finally burst. Bank collapse, business failed, panic spread across the economy. Even the Bank of England had to step in to prevent the total financial meltdown. Now, combine that with the Great Irish Famine, which also peaked around this time, we see a clear pattern: economic collapse, social unrest, widespread suffering. So this is a powerful example of how 定位年, I mean the red goat year, did not just mark political or natural disasters, but also major financial turbulence, I mean market panic. So when we say 赤马红羊节, we are not quoting superstition. We are pointing to real, repeating historical patterns. That is the earlier first cycle. Let's move on to the there's another one in China. Okay, this, have you heard about this Taiping Rebellion? And this guy called Hong Xiuquan. Hong Xiuquan was the leader of the Taiping Rebellion, one of the most devastating uprising in Chinese history. You go and Google, very interesting story. Almost turned the whole China into a Christian country. Yeah. Okay. Although the rebellion officially began in 1850, its roots can be traced back to 1847, a year that falls within the 赤马红羊节 cycle. Now, why is this important? 赤马红羊节 years, like this 1846 and 1847, are traditionally associated with major social and political upheaval. These years create conditions ripe for unrest, ripe for rebellion, and ripe for widespread turmoil. Hong Xiuquan's early struggles and his visions and the spread of his revolutionary ideas all took shape during this turbulent time. In Hong Xiuquan case, a seed planted in the 赤马红羊节 cycle set the stage for one of the largest upheaval later down the road. So this Hong Xiuquan was the seed that was grown during the 赤马红羊节. Now let's move on to the second cycle, 1906 and 1907, 丙午定位. San Frank earthquake, 1906, one of the most devastating earthquake in US history. Magnitude is 7.9, leaving over 3,000 dead and much of the cities in ruins. I mean destroyed. And then China, again China. China in 1906, the Qing dynasty was desperately trying to save itself. You know, Qing dynasty around that time was very, very weak. So it launched massive constitutional reforms, trying to modernize its military, its legal and educational systems. But it was too little and too late. So by 1907, chaos deepened. Anti-Qing revolutionary movement were rising. There were frequent uprisings, including the ethnic conflict in Yunnan and Guangxi, showing the cracks in the Qing control. At the same time, there were also running parallel natural disasters like floods, droughts, famines, swept across many provinces, devastating a lot of those rural livelihoods. So what do we see? We see China caught in the fire of both internal reform and internal disasters, and then external rebellions. Obviously compounded by, as I said, natural calamities. Exactly the kind of turbulent energy we associate with the red horse and the red goat years. So again, history echoes these ancient warnings. 赤马红羊节 meaning these 2 years is not to be taken lightly. But that doesn't mean we have to fear these 2 years. Just that we have to be aware and prepare. Then 1907, other parts of the world. In US, a major financial disaster strike that's called the Panic of 1907. The New York Stock Exchange plummeted almost 50% from its peak. Banks start to fail, businesses start to collapse, people rush to withdraw their savings, triggering widespread bank runs. It all began when speculators tried to corner the copper market, which led to the collapse of key financial institutions. So panic spread quickly. Without a central bank to stabilize the system, fear ruled the markets. So luckily for us now, we have central banks. Every country should have a central bank right now. Okay, so the crisis was so severe back then, it led to the eventual creation of the Federal Reserve systems in US just a few years later. Once again, in in a 赤马红羊 year, right, we see the theme instability, we see fear, we see systemic shock. So the fire energy of this 赤马红羊 builds pressure, and if unchecked, something will get burned. Whether it's a political system, whether it's an empire, or in this case, the financial structure of a nation. If it's asking, sorry, master, what I mean is 2026 already jialat, 2027 will be worse, right? We should see these 2 years hand in hand. Hand in hand. Okay? Because if 2026 is better managed, 2027 may not be that worse. If 2026 is allowed to run loose and wild, then 2027 could be worse off. So it really depends what we do and what we prepare in 2026. Okay, let's move on to the most recent cycle, 1966, 1967. In 66, China havoc. China was set ablaze, not by literal fire, but by political and social upheaval. This was the start of the Cultural Revolution launched by Mao Zedong to reassert control and eliminate the so-called capitalist elements from the Chinese society. So the students back then became the Red Guards. Temples were destroyed, intellectuals were attacked, schools closed, family torn apart. Over the next 10 years, millions suffered. It wasn't just political, it was a complete destruction of cultural heritage, education, and personal freedoms. So again, in 赤马红羊, the fire energy dominates. It burns through the old, but with it, innocent lives, wisdom, and stability are also scorched. So in 1967, the fire didn't fade off. It actually intensified for China. Okay, so if 1966 was the spark of the Cultural Revolution, then 1967 was when the flames reached out of control. The chaos escalated into violence, fictional struggles, even among the Red Guards themselves. So armed conflicts broke out across cities in Chongqing, in Wuhan. Opposing factions literally went to war. So it became like a civil war. So the country fell deeper into anarchy. Government institutions were practically paralyzed. Factories, schools, hospitals were either shut down or barely functioning. People's livelihood were destroyed. So the energy back then was extreme, was chaotic, and if you look at it, it's uncontainable. So you see, 赤马红羊 reunited the revolution, fanned the flame. Is an ancient pattern in real history. Now, 1966 again was a turning point in the Vietnam War. It just I give you a present day parallel: Russian-Ukraine. Now, right now, the war between Russia and Ukraine is fight between Russia and Ukraine. directly. The rest are all, behind the scene. Okay, so back then in 1986 there was a Vietnam War. The rest are all behind the scenes. But 1960s, United States decided dramatically increase its military presence. So by the end of 66, over 385,000 American troops were on the ground in Vietnam. That means US get involved. 1996 was the year US decided to get involved. So it wasn't just a war anymore. It had become a massive international conflict, drawing deep political, economical, and emotional cost. Airstrikes intensified, ground battles grew bloodier, civilians casualty mounted. So this Pingwu, you know, very chaotic. So together they create an environment of extreme heat, volatility, and aggression, the very atmosphere of warfare. So 1966 wasn't just a year in history, it was a literal manifestation of the 赤马弘扬节, bringing the global unrest and destruction, exactly as the ancient warned. So whenever we enter a Pingwu or Tingwei, pay attention because the energy can ignite major upheaval in the world. There's another one. I think in 67. So in just 6 days lah, in 67, a major war erupted in the Middle East. It's called the 6 Day War. You can Google it. It's called the 6 Day War. Israel fought against Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and emerged as with a decisive victory. Wow, 1 against 3, still win. Capturing territories like the West Bank, Gaza Strip, Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. But the outcome came at a heavy cost. Mass displacement of the people there, long-term tension like what we see in Gaza and West Bank, and the roots of ongoing conflict in the region today. Indeed, from 66 to 67, we witnessed back-to-back global crises, war, revolution, and unrest, perfectly mirroring this energetic warning. So when such energy return, we must be prepared, not just politically or physically, but energetically. Now, Darren is saying this one, looking at the pattern at the political system, financial system, etc. One thing that keep in mind, everyone is crazy about gold these few years, and recently October 2025 is an indication of it. However, if people 不要见好就收, hold high hopes in gold, then 26, 27 may cry for tears, depend on their investment. That's right. Okay, thanks for the hint. Is that your hint for us? Thank you, Darren. Yes. So like I said, the market panic, right? That's why I've shared about one case in US, right? What do? They speculate in the copper market, right? And then it bursts. So next year, if you speculate into one of the specific commodities or whatever, just be careful what you are into. Okay, so now we have examined the past 3 cycles. Then how about the upcoming cycle, 26, 27? The scale could be unimaginable. I mean, we have seen the past. So it's not surprising to imagine that the next 2 years could be something like perhaps a nationwide violence and upheaval, tens of thousands of deaths and mass purges, breakdown of institution and civil order. So we have examined, right, the key historical events from the past 3 cycles. We can start to spot some patterns. I think Darren has spotted also about the gold thing. So broadly, these events actually, if you are okay with my categorization, you can do your own categorization if you see more things. So what I will categorize into 4 main categories are natural disasters and environmental crisis, right? And then the next pillar will be the financial crisis, like what Darren mentioned. Third will be the political and social upheaval. And last but not least, if not managed well, it could lead to military conflicts or wars. Looking at this pattern, we ask an important question. which of this category is more likely to show up in 2026? Isn't it true? Okay, so to answer that, we can't rely on history because history just gives us a glimpse. It won't happen exactly the same again, but it's the form, 形在那边哈。And we cannot also rely on just interpreting 丙午年 alone, this earthly branch and the heavenly stem. We need to pull in other information like the ruling I Ching hexagram of the year, the 地母经, and others to refine and to sharpen our forecast. So let's dive deeper and see what else 2026 is telling us.